The Zilani homeworld of Kristara had once been called the Jewel of the Outer Rim Territories. Its magnificent crystal spires reached toward twin suns, refracting light into rainbow cascades that painted the sky in brilliant colors. Now, those same spires lay shattered, their fragments scattered across burning streets as crimson smoke blotted out the stars, Ambassador. Valnine crouched behind the twisted remains of what had been the Grand Council chamber, his forearms shaking. As explosions rocked the building, through the broken walls, he could see them, the Vorthok war machines rolling through his city like metallic locusts. Each one stood 3 meters tall, their chrome bodies bristling with weapons that hummed. With deadly energy, behind their glowing red optical sensors lay an intelligence both ancient and merciless. His people were dying. The elegant Zilani had built their civilization on art, philosophy, and scientific achievement. They had created wonders that amazed, the galaxy cities that sang with harmonic frequencies, healing crystals that could mend broken bodies, and spacecraft that moved like living poetry through space. But all their beauty meant nothing against the cold efficiency of the Vorthok swarms. Val9 activated his emergency transmitter with trembling fingers. The device flickered to life, its blue glow seeming pathetically weak against the orange flames, consuming his world. He had resisted this moment for weeks, knowing what it would mean. The Galactic Council had made their position clear. Humanity was too dangerous, too unpredictable, too savage to be trusted with major conflicts. But 17 worlds had fallen to the Vorthok advance, and traditional galactic warfare had proven utterly useless. "This is Ambassador Valnine of the Zilani Confederation," he began, his voice cracking as another building collapsed nearby. "We are dying. Vorthok have consumed 17 of our worlds in just 3 cycles. Our finest weapons cannot penetrate. They're adaptive shields. Our greatest tactical minds have been outmaneuvered at every turn. They learn from each battle, becoming stronger while we grow weaker." He paused as a group of Vorthok drones marched past his hiding spot, their mechanical feet crushing the delicate crystal flowers that had once lined the ceremonial pathways. One of the machines stopped, its sensor array turning toward his location. Valnine held his breath, pressing deeper into the rubble. After what felt like an eternity, the drone moved on, following its programmed patrol route. "You call upon the species known as humans from the planet Earth," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The Council has forbidden direct contact, but we have no choice. Our children are being harvested.
Oh.
Our elders are being converted into mechanical horrors. If there is any mercy left in this galaxy, please respond. May the ancestors forgive us for what we are about to unleash." The transmission shot across space at faster than light speeds, carrying with it the desperation of a dying civilization 73 light-years away. Dan Lee-Hoon stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching the tactical display that showed their patrol route through the neutral zone. The ship was a testament to human engineering, angular where alien vessels were curved, brutal where others were elegant. Its hull bore the scars of a dozen border skirmishes, and its weapon systems were designed with one purpose in mind: to kill efficiently. Captain Lieutenant Park Mina called from her communications station, her young face tense with concentration. "We're receiving a priority transmission on the galactic emergency frequency. Sir, it's a request for military assistance." He turned, his dark eyes sharp with interest. In 6 months of patrolling the outer systems, they had received exactly 0 requests for help from the galactic community. Most alien species went out of their way to avoid human contact, viewing Earth's children as unpredictable savages who had somehow stumbled into space travel. "To put it through," he ordered. The bridge fell silent as Ambassador Valnine's desperate plea filled the air. When it ended, the crew exchanged glances. They had all heard stories about the Vorthok, ancient machines that consumed civilizations and converted organic life into mechanical servants. Until now, they had been someone else's problem. "Sir," Park Mina said quietly, "they're offering full technology exchange and permanent political alliance. Zilani have some of the most advanced crystal-based tech in the galaxy." "Commander." Kim Day stepped forward from his position at the weapons console. His face bore a long scar from a pirate raid near Proxima Centauri, and his eyes held the cold calculation of a man who had seen too much combat. The real question is why they're calling us Captain. The Galactic Council has made it clear they think we're too violent for their civilized wars? Hyan's jaw tightened as he considered the implications. The galactic community had spent months debating whether to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity. They found human military doctrine disturbing, human weapons primitive, and human tactical thinking dangerously unpredictable. Most species preferred warfare that followed established rules, elegant energy exchanges conducted at safe distances with minimal collateral damage. Because they think we're savages, Hune said finally. Maybe it's time to show them what Earth's children can do when savagery is exactly what's needed. Within the hour, the Vengeance was transmitting coordinates to Fleet Command.
Admiral!
Cho's son's response was immediate and decisive. The Third Fleet would mobilize for humanity's first major intervention in galactic affairs. 12 destroyers, 6 heavy cruisers, and the massive dreadnought Retribution began charging their jump drives. Their crews preparing for a war unlike anything they had faced before as the human fleet prepared to depart. Automated monitoring stations throughout known space detected the energy signatures and transmitted urgent warnings to their respective governments. The humans were coming to war, and nobody knew what that really meant. They only knew that when apex predators from a death world decided to hunt, the galaxy itself would tremble. The tier in space-time rippled like disturbed water as the human fleet burst from hyperspace into the Zilani border system. What greeted them was a vision of systematic destruction that would have broken the spirits of most civilized species. The once proud Zilani defense fleet now drifted as glowing debris fields.
Wow.
Their beautiful crystalline hulls shattered into countless fragments that caught and scattered starlight like deadly diamonds. Major Alunji pressed her face closer to the observation window of the assault carrier Defiance, her breath fogging the reinforced glass as she surveyed the carnage. The Zilani had built their ships like works of art, flowing curves and transparent sections that made them appear almost alive as they moved through space. Now those same vessels were nothing more than expensive scrap metal, their crews either dead or worse. Contact, shouted sensor operator Kim Jun from his station. Multiple Vorthok signatures detected there. Jesus Christ, they're eating the moon. Through the tactical display, the horrifying truth became clear. Vorthok harvester ships, each the size of a small city, had positioned themselves around Zelanophor's largest moon. Mechanical tendrils extended from their hulls like the arms of some cosmic octopus, grinding through rock and metal with terrifying efficiency. The moon was being consumed bite by bite, its raw materials converted into new war machines in the harvester's internal factories. How many Zilani survivors? Yunji asked, her voice steady despite the destruction surrounding them. Sergeant Jiang Min worked frantically at his console, filtering through dozens of weak distress signals. Approximately 40,000, ma'am. Most are holed up in the asteroid mining stations, but their life support won't last much longer. The Vorthok are systematically hunting down every pocket of resistance. The Major nodded grimly. She had seen plenty of war zones during the Mars Rebellion and the Jupiter-Moon conflicts, but this was different. This was extermination on an industrial scale. The Vorthok weren't just conquering territory, they were harvesting an entire civilization. Like farmers collecting grain, Captain Li Hyan's voice crackled over the communications system. All ships maintain formation. We're going in hot. Remember, we're not here to play by galactic rules. We're here to kill machines and save lives, in that order. As the human fleet moved deeper into the system, Ambassador Velnin's small diplomatic shuttle detached from a hidden asteroid base and approached the flagship. The alien diplomat had spent 3 days hiding from Vorthok patrol drones, watching his people die while waiting for a miracle that most of his species believed would never come. The shuttle's docking bay aboard. The UES Retribution was a stark contrast to the elegant curves of Zilani architecture. Everything was angular, functional, designed for maximum efficiency rather than aesthetic beauty. Ambassador Velnin's 4 legs trembled as he stepped onto the metal decking, his crystalline skin shifting through nervous color patterns that indicated deep distress. Commander Lim He was waiting for him in the hangar bay. and the alien's first impression of humanity's military representatives was both fascinating and terrifying. The human was casually checking the magazine of his pulse rifle while discussing tactical deployments with his staff, treating instruments of death as casually as most species handled eating utensils. Ambassador Lim said without looking up from his weapon, "Welcome aboard. Hope you don't mind if we skip the formal greetings. We've got a war to fight." Velnin's translator unit struggled with the casual tone. In galactic diplomacy, first contact protocols involved elaborate ceremonies, exchange of gifts, and detailed discussions of cultural sensitivities. This human was treating their meeting like a brief interruption in his daily routine. "Your weapons," the ambassador managed to say, his voice carrying the harmonic overtones that made Zilani's speech sound like music. "They fire solid projectiles? How? Primitive?" Lim's smile was cold enough to freeze hydrogen. He held up a single bullet, its tungsten core gleaming under the hangar's harsh lights. "Primitive works, Ambassador. These Vorthok machines of yours, they adapt to energy signatures, right? Learn to counter plasma beams and particle weapons after a few encounters." The alien nodded, his skin flickering through patterns of conformation, mixed with confusion, hard to adapt to a tungsten slug moving at 3 kilometers per second. Lim continued, sliding the bullet back into his magazine with practiced ease. "Physics is physics. Kinetic energy doesn't care how smart your computer brain is." As they moved through the ship's corridors toward the briefing room, Velnin experienced his first real taste of human military culture. The walls were lined with weapons racks holding everything from standard pulse rifles to exotic devices he couldn't identify. Crew members moved with purpose, their conversations focused on ammunition counts, target priorities, and casualty estimates, rather than the philosophical implications of warfare. The briefing room itself was a cramped, functional space dominated by a three-dimensional tactical display showing the Zilani system in painful detail. Lieutenant Colonel Beekso stood at the center, manipulating the hologram to show Vorthok positions and movement patterns. "The Vorthok are ancient," Velnin explained, his crystalline form catching the light from the display. "Half organic, half machine. They were old when my people first reached the stars. Their technology learns and evolves with each battle, incorporating new strategies and countermeasures. They convert conquered populations into hybrid warriors, using organic creativity enhanced by mechanical precision." The human officers exchanged glances that Velnin couldn't interpret. In galactic military doctrine, an adaptive enemy like the Vorthok was considered nearly unstoppable. Standard procedure would be to retreat, regroup, develop new technologies over several years before attempting another engagement. "Sounds like they haven't fought humans before," Beekso said with something that might have been anticipation. "That's about to change." As the briefing continued, Ambassador Velnin watched in growing alarm as the human officers discussed strategies that violated every galactic warfare convention. They talked about targeting civilian infrastructure, using weapons of mass destruction, and employing tactics that would be considered war crimes by any civilized species. These weren't military professionals planning an elegant campaign. They were apex predators preparing to hunt. The most disturbing part wasn't their casual attitude toward violence, but their obvious excitement about facing an opponent that had crushed 17 Zilani worlds. Where any other species would show fear or reluctance, these humans displayed an eagerness that bordered on bloodthirsty enthusiasm. "Ma'am," Sergeant Jiang Min interrupted, "we're receiving multiple distress calls. From the mining stations, the Vorthok have detected our arrival and are accelerating their harvesting operations." Major Yunji's expression hardened. "Time to show these machines what happens when they threaten human allies. All stations, combat alert. We're going hunting." As alarms began blaring throughout the ship, Ambassador Velnin realized he had made a choice that would change the galaxy forever. He had called for help from Earth's children, and now he was about to discover exactly what that meant. The mining station Keith Prime hung in space like a wounded giant, its crystalline structures flickering with dying emergency lights as Vorthok boarding craft attached themselves to its hull like mechanical parasites. Major Han UK watched the tactical display from his assault transport. counting the enemy signatures that crawled through the station's corridors like digital ants. 237 Vorthok units confirmed inside reported his intelligence. "Officer, they've been in there for 6 hours, adapting to Zilani defensive positions. The survivors are trapped in the central command center." Han Uk nodded grimly. The Vorthok had learned to counter every defensive measure the elegant Zilani could deploy. Energy barriers meant nothing to machines that could recalibrate their weapons in real time. Plasma cannons were useless against shields that adapted to their exact frequency. The mechanical invaders had turned galactic warfare into a chess game, where they always stayed 3 moves ahead. But humans didn't play chess when lives were on the line. They played to win. "Alpha and Bravo companies prepare for breach and clear," Han Uk ordered. "Remember, these machines think they know how galactic species fight. Show them they're wrong." Captain Song Yu crouched beside the outer airlock, her demolition charges already planted against the station's hull. The explosives were crude by galactic standards, simple chemical reactions that created expanding gases and flying debris. Most civilized species had moved beyond such primitive methods centuries ago, preferring clean energy weapons that left minimal collateral damage. The Vorthok had adapted their defensive algorithms to expect sophisticated weapons. They weren't ready for a controlled explosion that simply ripped a hole in the space station's side. "Fire in the hole!" Song Yu shouted, triggering the detonation. The blast tore through the crystalline hole like a hammer through glass, sending chunks of debris spinning into the void. Atmosphere rushed out in a glittering cloud of ice crystals, carrying with it anything not secured to the deck. 3 Vorthok units near the breach were caught off guard, their mechanical forms tumbling helplessly into space as their adaptive systems struggled to compensate for the sudden decompression. "Move." Sergeant Chen Su roared as his squad poured through the breach, their magnetic boots clamping onto the twisted metal with sharp clicks. The corridor beyond was a nightmare of floating debris and emergency lighting. But his Marines moved through it like they were born in zero gravity. The first Vorthok defenders were positioned exactly where galactic tactical doctrine said they should be, behind energy barriers in defensive positions that could cover the main approach routes. They had adapted to counter Zilani weapons, their shields calibrated to deflect plasma beams and particle weapons. What they encountered instead was the distinctive cracker of kinetic weapons spitting tungsten rounds at hypersonic velocities. The Vorthok energy shields, designed to disperse energy attacks, did nothing against solid projectiles that simply punched through their defensive fields like they weren't there. "Contact left," shouted Private Li Su as he put 3 rounds center mass into a Vorthok hybrid, watching the creature's organic components spray across the corridor wall. The machine part of the hybrid tried to continue fighting, but without its biological brain to provide creativity and adaptability. It was just an expensive piece of scrap metal. Corporal Ona saw the remaining Vorthok units beginning to adapt, their shields shifting frequencies to try to create kinetic barriers. She smiled grimly and switched ammunition types, loading armor-piercing rounds that could punch through starship hull plating. The Vorthok adaptive systems were impressive, but they couldn't violate the laws of physics. "When you're using the right ammo," she muttered, putting a round through a Vorthok commander's central processing unit, deeper in the station. Lieutenant Park Ji found himself face-to-face with 3 Vorthok hybrids in the narrow confines of a maintenance corridor. These weren't the mindless drones his squad had been fighting. These were elite units, their organic brains enhanced with mechanical precision and their bodies augmented with advanced weapon systems. The hybrids moved with inhuman speed, their plasma weapons charging with deadly winds. In the time it would take most species to draw their weapons, the Vorthok could have ended the fight. But Park Ji had been trained in the brutal, close-quarters combat techniques developed during Earth's urban wars. As the first hybrid raised its weapon, he was already moving, his vibroblade humming to life as he closed the distance in a single leap. The blade carved through mechanical limbs like they were made of plastic, sending sparks flying in every direction. The hybrid's organic brain registered shock. These primitive weapons shouldn't have been able to penetrate their enhanced armor. But shock was a luxury it couldn't afford as Park Ji's sidearm barked twice, putting rounds through the organic components that kept the machine functioning. The second hybrid tried to adapt, raising additional shields and switching to a different weapon frequency. Park G responded by grabbing a chunk of debris and hurling it at the creature's optical sensors, then following up with his blade when it raised its arms to block. Sophistication meant nothing when your opponent fought like a street brawler with military training. The third hybrid managed to fire a plasma burst that scorched the corridor, a wall inches from Park G's head, instead of taking cover like any civilized warrior would. He charged straight at the machine, his blade carving through its weapon arm before his sidearm finished the job. These humans, one of the surviving Vorthok units, transmitted to the collective as it retreated deeper into the station. They do not fight with honor. They do not follow established protocols. They fight to win, regardless of cost or convention. Back aboard the Vengeance, Captain Lee Hayen monitored the battle feeds with the cold satisfaction of a predator watching his pack hunt successfully. The tactical displays showed Vorthok units throughout the system beginning to adapt their strategies, sharing information about human tactics and developing countermeasures. "Sir," reported Commander Kim Dae from his position at the intelligence console, "enemy forces are requesting massive reinforcements. They're calling this encounter a significant adaptive challenge and requesting new strategic algorithms." Hyun's smile was predatory, the expression of a hunter who had just caught sight of prey. Let them adapt. Every minute they spend learning how to fight us is another minute we're not fighting them the same way. By the time they figure out our current tactics, we'll already be using different ones. The beauty of the human approach to warfare wasn't in its sophistication or elegance. It was in its absolute unpredictability. Where other species developed doctrine and stuck to it, humans treated every engagement as a chance to try something new and violent. Ambassador Velnine watched the tactical displays in growing horror as human forces employed strategies that seemed designed to maximize chaos rather than minimize casualties. The elegant Zalani way of war involved careful maneuvering, calculated risks, and civilized rules of engagement. What he was witnessing was something far more primitive and infinitely more effective. "Your people," he said to Colonel Shin, "do." His crystalline skin flickering with patterns of distress, they fight like wild animals. There are conventions, protocols, established methods of conducting civilized warfare. The colonel's expression was colder than deep space. "You called for backup, Ambassador. You didn't specify what kind," as if to emphasize his point. Another section of the mining station erupted in explosions as human marines detonated improvised charges in areas where Vorthok forces had concentrated. The machines had never encountered an enemy that would destroy their own allies' infrastructure just to deny it to the enemy. "The Vorthok will adapt to these tactics," Velnine protested weakly. Shindo's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. "Then we'll adapt faster. That's what predators do, Ambassador. We evolve." The battle for Keth Prime was won within 4 hours, but its implications would echo across the galaxy for generations. The Vorthok had encountered something they couldn't simply adapt to counter: an enemy that refused to fight by any rules, except their own. 3 weeks of brutal warfare had transformed the conflict from a rescue mission into something far more sinister. The Vorthok Collective, an intelligence that had consumed civilizations for millennia, found itself facing an enemy that defied every strategic algorithm in its vast databases. These humans didn't just fight differently, they seemed to relish the chaos of battle in ways that violated the collective's understanding of rational behavior. In the depths of their manufacturing complexes, the Vorthok worked frantically to develop new weapon systems. The convergence units represented their most advanced response to the human threat hybrid warriors that combined the best of organic creativity with mechanical precision, specifically designed to counter everything they had learned about human tactics. Each convergence unit stood nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies a seamless fusion of living tissue and adaptive technology. Their organic brains had been enhanced with quantum processors that could calculate thousands of tactical variations in microseconds. Their mechanical bodies could shift and reconfigure themselves based on battlefield conditions, growing additional armor plating or sprouting new weapon systems as needed. The first deployment came at the contested mining world of Kepler 4, 38B, where Colonel Park Dew was leading a standard assault on a Vorthok supply depot. His Marines had grown confident after weeks of easy victories against conventional Vorthok forces. They expected another routine engagement against predictable mechanical opponents. What they encountered instead was a nightmare: the convergence. Units moved with inhuman grace, their adaptive armor deflecting kinetic rounds while their weapon systems fired streams of superheated plasma that could melt through human power armor in seconds. But worse than their technology was their behavior. These machines fought with a creativity that matched human unpredictability, employing tactics that seemed to anticipate every move the Marines made. Fall back, Park Dew shouted, as his men retreated through the depot's corridors, leaving behind the bodies of soldiers who had been caught off guard by enemies that fought like humans but moved like machines. General Kong, he received the battle reports aboard the dreadnought. Retribution, her weathered face grim as she studied the tactical analysis. The Vorthok had learned to fight like humans, but they were still machines at their core. That gave humanity one crucial advantage: they could still be surprised by the depths of human brutality. Intelligence indicates this facility produces 60% of their adaptive combat systems, she announced to her staff officers, gesturing to the holographic display that showed the Vorthok manufacturing world of Nexus 7. The planet was a mechanical marvel, its surface covered with factories that stretched from pole to pole, churning out the weapons and warriors that had brought the galaxy to its knees. Major Wan Si shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Ma'am, the facility is located on a populated world. 17 million Vorthok civilians live in the residential sectors. Galactic conventions prohibit direct attacks on galactic conventions. Admiral Cho's son's voice cut through the briefing. Room via hololink, his image flickering with barely contained rage. Didn't help the Zilani when their children were being harvested. We're not bound by the failures of civilized warfare. The attack on Nexus 7 began at 0800 hours ship time. With a coordinated orbital bombardment that would have made the old warlords of Earth proud, Colonel Yogen commanded the kinetic strike from his position aboard the battlecruiser Hammer. Watching through the targeting system as his weapons prepared to rain death from space, firing kinetic penetrators, he reported calmly, as if he were ordering lunch instead of obliterating a planet's industrial capacity. The tungsten rods fell from orbit like spears thrown by an angry god, their hypersonic impact creating explosions that registered on seismic equipment 3-star systems away. Each penetrator struck with the force of a nuclear weapon, but instead of radiation, it delivered pure kinetic energy that shattered the planet's crust and sent shock waves rippling through the core. But the kinetic bombardment was just the beginning. Captain No Ree's biowarfare division had been working around the clock to develop weapons specifically designed to target the organic components of Vorthok hybrids. The viral payloads deployed from high orbit were invisible to mechanical sensors, but lethal to biological tissue, spreading through the planet's atmosphere like digital plague. Deploying biological agents, No Ree reported with the same professional detachment her grandfather had used when describing his work during the corporate wars on Mars. Estimated effectiveness against hybrid targets, 97%. Ambassador Velnine watched the destruction from the observation deck of a human cruiser, his forearms trembling as he recorded his observations for what might be the last testimony of his species. The elegant crystal cities of Nexus 7, architectural marvels that had taken centuries to build, crumbled into dust in minutes. The planet's artificial atmosphere, carefully maintained by environmental processors, began to leak into space as the infrastructure collapsed. Humans fight as if the universe itself is their enemy, he whispered into his recording device. They show no restraint, no mercy, no consideration for the consequences of their actions. They are magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. The Vorthok response was immediate and overwhelming. Every fleet, every battle group, every available military asset the collective possessed began converging on human positions. They deployed weapons that could crack moons in half and energy fields that boiled space itself. Technology so advanced that it seemed like magic to younger species. The battle for the Zolani core worlds became a fighting retreat as human forces found themselves outnumbered 50-1. Lieutenant Commander Seo Bin led her fighter squadron in a desperate defense of the evacuation routes. Her small craft, weaving through barrages of energy that could vaporize asteroids. "This is Valkyrie 1, she transmitted as her fighter's hull temperature spiked from near misses. "Enemy dreadnought bearing 27 Mark IV. I'm going for a torpedo run." Her squadron followed her into the teeth of the enemy formation. There, small fighters dancing between massive Vorthok vessels like gnats attacking elephants. But these gnats carried nuclear warheads, and when they detonated inside enemy shield generators, even the mighty Vorthok dreadnoughts felt the sting. "If we're going to die," Seo Bin's voice crackled over the cum as her fighter took a direct hit, "we're taking these bastards with us." The war had evolved beyond anyone's expectations. The Vorthok collective, faced with an enemy that refused to follow rational patterns, had been forced to abandon its own logical constraints. Their new hybrid warriors fought with a creativity that bordered on insanity, employing tactics that violated their own programming in pursuit of victory. What the galaxy was witnessing was no longer a conflict between organic life and mechanical precision. It had become a contest between two apex predator species, each one pushing the other to evolve into something more deadly. The Vorthok had learned to fight like humans, while humans had learned to think like machines when it came to calculating acceptable losses. Ambassador Velnine, watching from his position aboard the human flagship, realized with growing horror that his desperate call for help had unleashed something that might be worse than the original threat. The humans were winning, but they were winning by becoming monsters themselves. The question was no longer whether humanity could defeat the Vorthok collective. The question was whether the galaxy would survive what humanity became in the process of winning. The Vorthok home system was a monument to mechanical perfection, a testament to what an ancient intelligence could accomplish given enough time and resources. 7 artificial worlds orbited the dying red giant at the system's heart, each one a perfect sphere of metal and crystal connected by energy bridges that sparkled like jewels against the cosmic darkness. For 3,000 years, this had been the beating heart of an empire that spanned half the galaxy. Now it would become humanity's final battlefield. General Kong Mi stood in the command center of the dreadnought Retribution, surrounded by holographic displays showing the impossible odds they faced. Every human vessel that could still fight had been gathered for this assault, destroyers with hull breaches sealed by emergency foam, cruisers running on backup power, and fighters held together by determination and prayer. "We're outnumbered 50-1, she announced to the fleet commanders whose faces appeared on screens throughout the ship. "Their technology is superior. Their numbers are overwhelming. They have every tactical advantage that military science can calculate." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of inevitable death. These officers had followed her through 3 weeks of the most brutal warfare in human history, watching their comrades die in battles that should have been impossible to survive. Now she was asking them to charge into the very heart of enemy space on what could only be described as a suicide mission. Admiral Cho Sun's weathered face appeared on the main communication screen, his eyes carrying the cold fire that had made him a legend during the Titan rebellions. "But they made one critical error," he said, his voice carrying clearly through every ship in the fleet. "They let us get close enough to hurt them." The Admiral's words sparked something in the human crews that no amount of tactical planning could have achieved. It was the recognition that even hopeless odds could be overcome through sheer bloody-minded determination to drag your enemies into hell with you. "All ships," General Kong Mi ordered, "attack formation. We're going in fast and hard. Make every shot count, because we won't get a second chance." The human fleet charged directly into the heart of the Vorthok home system like a spear thrust at the throat of a giant. Energy weapons blazed across the darkness as defensive platforms opened fire, their beams bright enough to blind unprotected eyes. The space around the artificial world swarmed with Vorthok defenders, sleek vessels that moved with mechanical precision, their hulls bristling with weapons that could shatter moons. Captain Anbo pushed his destroyer Defiant through a gauntlet of enemy fire that should have vaporized his ship in the first 30 seconds. His crew worked their stations with desperate efficiency as sections of the hull vented atmosphere and emergency lights flickered throughout the corridors. "Engineering, I need more power to the forward shields," he shouted over the sound of explosions echoing through the ship's frame. "Sir, we're already running at 120%, came the reply from Chief Engineer Park Soo. "If I push it any harder, the reactor will go critical. Then push it harder." Onbo snarled, watching as another destroyer exploded in a ball of superheated plasma. Better to die fighting than to die cowering. The Defiant's weapons blazed as it carved through the enemy formation, its kinetic cannons sending tungsten rounds through Vorthok holes like bullets through paper. But for every enemy ship they destroyed, 3 more took its place, their adaptive systems learning from each encounter. Major Hong Soo led her Marine battalion in a desperate boarding action against a Vorthok command vessel, using magboot charges to breach the enemy hull while under fire from defensive turrets. Her soldiers poured through the opening like a tide of destruction, their weapons spitting death as they carved their way through corridors filled with mechanical defenders. "Move fast, die hard," she roared as her troops advanced through a storm of plasma fire. "These machines want to see how humans fight. Let's show them." The battle inside the Vorthok vessel was a nightmare of close-quarters combat with Marines. Using improvised explosives and sheer determination to overcome enemies that should have been technologically superior, Hong Soo personally led the assault on the bridge, her vibroblade carving through mechanical limbs while her sidearm put rounds through control systems that sparked and died. In the depths of space, Corporal Tak Yo piloted his fighter through a maze of energy beams and missile trails, his small craft dancing between massive enemy dreadnoughts like a mosquito attacking elephants. His fighter had been damaged in the initial assault, its left engine trailing vapor in its weapon systems. Operating on backup power, but strapped to his fighter's belly was a jury-rigged antimatter warhead that could crack a small moon if detonated properly. "This is Ghost 7, he transmitted as he lined up his attack run on the largest Vorthok vessel. "I'm going for the big one. Tell my family I died doing something that mattered," his fighter screamed toward the enemy dreadnought, defensive fire converging on his position as the Vorthok recognized the threat. Energy beams seared past his cockpit as he held course, his finger hovering over the trigger. That would convert matter into pure energy. The turning point came not from the massive fleet battle raging around the artificial worlds, but from a small team of Special Forces operators who had been launched toward the Central Intelligence and stealth pods disguised as debris. Commander Lim Hae led the infiltration team through maintenance shafts and service corridors, using technology that the advanced Vorthok had never bothered to defend against: chemical explosives, primitive timers, old-fashioned sabotage techniques that predated spaceflight. "The collective thinks in terms of advanced technology," Lim Hae whispered to his team as they planted charges throughout the Central Intelligence's core systems. They never considered that someone might use Stone Age methods to bring down their digital god. The artificial construct that housed the Vorthok Central Intelligence was a marvel of engineering. Its quantum processors capable of calculating the movement of every atom in the galaxy. But all that computational power meant nothing when primitive. Explosive charges severed the physical connections that held the network together. For Earth, Lim Hae whispered as he activated the timer that would bring down an empire spanning half the galaxy. The destruction of the Central Intelligence sent cascading failures through the Vorthok network like a computer virus made of pure chaos. Their hybrid warriors collapsed as their controlling systems failed, their organic brains unable to function without mechanical support. Their fleets began firing on each other as competing subroutines fought for dominance, turning the organized defense into a mechanical civil war. The artificial worlds began to break apart as their maintenance systems failed, centuries of perfect engineering collapsing in minutes. The energy bridges that connected them flickered and died, sending massive structures tumbling into the dying star at the system's heart. In the aftermath, Ambassador Velnine stood on the observation deck of a human cruiser, watching salvage crews strip useful technology from the wreckage of the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever known. The Vorthok Empire, which had seemed unstoppable just hours before, now existed only as floating debris and broken dreams. You saved us, he told General Kungmi as she surveyed the battlefield that had once been the enemy's greatest stronghold. But at what cost to yourselves, the generals? Expression was unreadable, carved from stone and tempered by fire. Around them, the human fleet counted their losses, 60% casualties. Ships running on emergency power, entire crews reduced to handfuls of survivors. The victory had come at a price that would have broken most civilizations. Cost of survival, she replied quietly. Nothing more, nothing less. As news of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy through quantum communication networks, other species began to reassess their position in the cosmic order. The humans had proven something that challenged the foundation of civilized warfare. Sometimes the only way to defeat a monster was to become something even more monstrous. The war was over. The Vorthok Empire had fallen. And throughout known space, alien civilizations asked themselves the same terrifying question. What other horrors might emerge from the small blue world they had once dismissed as irrelevant? Earth's children had answered the call for help, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The end.